So, uh, a work session, roundtable discussion on the levy that we lost for a second time in November. And Susanna, you're gonna lead the charge this evening. You and Keith apparently are gonna do the presenting, and then we'll have time for questions and thoughts. So go ahead, please.
Okay, so I'm going to start with just kind of the financial history and walk back through from budget time forward. I'm just going to pause. You guys can ask questions or reflect as we go because, and I didn't make a formal PowerPoint or anything like that. So just stop and ask questions or reflect along the way.
All right, go ahead.
So as you guys remember, when we wrote the original budget, and for purposes, it's right here on the website, and I'm just pulling it from here. That way, if you don't have the document, if you don't have it, or somebody watching needs to know where it's at. So our budgets, of course, are on our website. So when we did the original budget, and we approved the original budget, and that's this 2021 budget. We talked about how our 5-year forecast, and it was right at the beginning of COVID, and we didn't really know what was going on, and we don't know what's going to happen with the levy because we need to vote for it in this year because this one will be all depending on if the votes pass. So for the pool, we put the 5-year forecast, and one of the things that we talked a lot about during the budget cycle is me spending a lot of time to improve this report because it's important that when we approve a budget today, we look at the effects in the future, and we spend a lot of time putting together maintenance plans and those kind of stuff. So when we're looking at the pool budget, and this budget for the 5-year forecast, we did put the levy in. We were going to be positive, and we're going to say, look, we're going to get the levy. It's going to pass. And this was the normal growth percentage increase that we normally would have. And as we can see, the pool doesn't make it. It's not in fiscal compliance right off the bat for this 2021 year forward. This current fiscal year it matches, but it didn't going forward. And then we looked at the pool maintenance. You can see we had option 1, a full replacement of the HVAC system at $500,000. We had option 2, or A, which as maybe we only need to do repairs. Maybe we won't have to replace the full thing, and we can plan for that. And we were looking at doing some sort of repair next year and having to do a full replacement by 22-23. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The HVAC system went out this fiscal year instead. Best laid plans, correct? Surge pit is still on here. And as you can see, we never had the boiler because that was not on our radar. It was going to go out, as well as the light in the pool that we replaced when we finished the resurfacing and some other electrical issues that got done when the pool was resurfaced. So these were the repairs. These are what we were looking at. These were our assumptions. And if we followed what we know needs to get done, the roof is on here for next year with the new gutters because we've been doing patchwork on the leak all along. So all of that is in that budget when we approve the budget with this 5-year projection when we approved the budget back in May.
So, Susanna, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
That up at the top, that HVAC repair option 8, was there going to be an attempt, or did we have some engineering or anything behind that number that we could patch that some more? That's not a very good, I didn't ask that very well, but that's my question, I guess. Did we have a patch option there?
Keith may have to answer that.
Yeah, I can answer this. So yeah, Hank, there was initial hope that maybe what we could do instead was just do basically what it says here is a patch job, repair job. With the recent outage and with the advice of the HVAC people that we had come in and look at it, They said that putting the 100,000 didn't make sense when the bigger project was going to be needed, and they weren't even sure with the 100,000 that they'd get the HVAC working again. So the recommendation based off of the failure that we received this time was to avoid that option A and to go straight to option B and do the full repair.
Sure. Okay.
So that's been what the focus has been on. We had a lot of discussion about this. The concern was putting good money towards bad. So that's been what we're looking at, and still waiting for the trust to come back with what their estimates are and estimations. So when we have that information, we'll share that. But unfortunately, it's not ready for this meeting.
Yeah, we don't have it yet. So that's just kind of a refresher of the things that we talked about on the concerns if the levy didn't pass when we approved the pool. Any other questions or comments on this part? Okay. And of course, when we go to do the work, we have to go get actual new contractors and put official bids and those kind of things. And we use the estimates that were given in the past, and then in inflation, this is where we round it up to. So then on, I have this out of order, no. Then on the July 6th, we talked about the levy, talked about what was happening. And then I had this estimate here, what I thought we would be spending every month while we were closed with COVID. This estimate was off by about $5,000. When I gave you the quarter one's report, it's coming out to be more of a 20,000 average, not a 15. That was my best educated guess with what me trying to figure out what staffing would look like and those kind of things. And of course we have some, and then just really, it was really guessing my best educated guess. And when I gave you quarter one's numbers, so here's the actual breakdown of how the month worked out to get to the 84,000 negative that I presented to you with the quarter update. When I gave you the quarter review for, that was given, do I have it? Yep. That one was given to you on October 19th when I had this spreadsheet here showing you the expenses to date where we have spent 92,400. I round for easy purposes to where we had spent to date. So here's the breakdown of what that looks like for what we spent on personnel for each month, what we spent on materials and services for each month. Can you guys see that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. And of course, this is the broiler. And it's coming out, just taking personnel and materials and services, it's averaging out at 20. So what it's really coming out to. And then of course the pool was partly open. And because how we're paid once a month, that depending on the weeks are open, that's why salaries look weird because of the timing, correct? And then this is October, which is the full month. We were open, pool was opened. So that gives you a look at what happens in the entire month. We're still 51,000 in the hole for just the actual expenses for the month of October only. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I took November's to date. So here we are to date. And I printed this report fresh right off the press. Taking a look at my November numbers, you can see where our revenues that have come in, we have a negative because we're refunding the people's swim lessons for April that was waiting for it to reopen, and then all the annual memberships that were December forward. So we've got some negative revenue in here this month for paying those people back. And then you can see from our expenses where we're sitting with the 90,000 and the 71 with the revenue for here. So that's where it is for the moment. The other piece of information was that I took down here. This is the average of last year's totals. This is kind of how it came out. So we averaged about 30. So we're about 10,000 under with the average expenses with with less people and less times the pool's open. So it wasn't a big change. Any questions on any of that so far? Just to where the numbers are up through what I told you through Q1.
Hey, Susanna, this is Chris Mullen. Can you go back to November?
Here.
So it seems like there's the materials and services uptick. Can you talk about that 45K?
Okay, so what materials and services did I take out? I had the boiler that was moved down. Let me take a look at it. It's a combination of this total with this total. It's 43,000. So this total,
I see.
this year to date.
I got it.
So,
to date. My bad. Got it.
No, you're okay. So what we have spent so far for November is what's the bills that have come in so far. We spent 2,200 for actual the month of October, making it to 71. But in this 31,000 here, this is coded by mistake. The 26,000 for the resurfacing of the pool and the fixing the light and doing some electrical belongs in capital outlay. And I haven't done the journal entry to move it. And that's where I'm showing you here that 26,000 plus the 32. So we've done 58,000 in capital outlay projects as of November 30th and spent 45 in materials and services and 90 in salaries from July 1st all the way through November 30th.
Got it. I missed the to date.
Susanna, another question.
Even though you said it like twice.
Sorry, no, it's okay. Sometimes I talk fast.
You're good. My apologies.
Susanna, another question for John and Susan, the average citizen out there who didn't quite make it through their CPA course. What's the essential number that they need to pick out of this? And I'll figure that most of us semi-experts have got it figured out, but just citizens out there watching this, what's the essential number so far that they should look at? That 189?
This is where we are right now. We're a negative 189,000 for the revenue versus the expenditures without any levy money because I haven't posted the levy money yet.
Perfect.
So that's just people who have showed up at the pool. The $4,500 is just punch cards, memberships, golden sneakers, the senior programs, any old levy money that has, we're still collecting. That's what that money is. That's coming to date.
Since the 1st of July to the end of November, that 189 is how far we are in the hole in the pool.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. And our total budget for property taxes was only 178. Well, 183. So that would bring us to zero if we actually got every penny.
Okay.
Of the levy money that we budgeted.
All right, thank you. Go ahead. As far as I'm concerned, anybody else?
Susanna?
Yeah.
You don't have in here the utilities, and I know we've talked about this before, but the utilities are going to be about the same with the pool closed. Is that correct? You still have to do.
So it could go down because Mike has turned off the boiler, turned off a bunch of the equipment, and just having air movement and the water flow movement going. So that should decrease some. I just have no idea how much at this point. So here's your utility right here. We spent 7,200 on electricity to date and 5,700 on natural gas. And for salaries, it's going to be about $600 a month for the person who's going to be going in about 5 hours a week and just monitoring the water, the equipment, doing a maintenance check on everything, and just making sure the pool stays in frozen status, for lack of better words. This is a part-time employee, so there's no health benefits, retirement. There's none of all those packages. So the hours that he's going to spend, it's just hours and payroll taxes. So that's why you're seeing a drop, where you're going to see it drop from 12,000, 7,000 down to the 600 a month, because I no longer have a full benefit package employee.
Okay, someone else? Go ahead, Susanna.
So what we're doing, and I'm doing this with everybody actually, with all the funds that are in possible crisis. Each month I'm going through and updating our actuals and putting in there, budgeting out what it, if everything kept coming in the same way it does. When you're doing a quick estimate, you add up what you've done to date, multiply it by the number of months that you're looking at, and then just multiply that by 12. Some doesn't always work, but it kind of gives you a ballpark picture of where we think we are. And then when I sit down with the manager, we go through the line items and look at what it might actually end up coming out to be. So for the pool, I have what I think it would look like at the end of this year, shrinking everything down, and actually salaries may even come down lower now that I know what it looks like. But at this point, this is where I had revenue, what I would think it would come in, along with what I think salaries were going to come in at. Like I said, that might be a little bit less at 55 total, as of what I'm looking at is June 30th of 21. This is my best educated guess with my numbers through October. I haven't updated this for November yet because I literally just closed payroll today. So I can just now start to put November's numbers in once I know Randy's got all of November expenditures posted. Okay. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Okay. So with my numbers, with my actuals through October 31st, going line by line, this is my educated guess of what the year would look like at the end as of June 30th of 21. We spent a total of 55,000 in salaries, a total of 80,000 in materials and services.
Here we go. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out now what I've got, where we're going to end, and what would it look like without property tax and or levy tax money, and what would I need to do for the pool to be okay with knowing the maintenance that's on the table.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what I'm doing here to come up with an idea. So I took out the property tax for the future years because this is the same 5-year projection model that I used in the budget. It'll be the same one I'm going to use in the next budget. And it's the same one I'm using when we work on building budgets for even in a budget adjustments for this year or doing future budgets, because it's critical that we look at what we do today and how it affects tomorrow. It's very important in government accounting. So best case scenario, we get every penny that we budgeted. So I budget plan that we get 100% of what we budgeted for property tax, because I don't know the answer yet. That is our actual beginning fund balance. Okay. This is the revenue that with what's been coming in, if it kept coming in consistently, and then I stopped it as of November, I stopped it. That's what I'm guessing for memberships and stuff. We're going to get about 7,000. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do best case scenario in this example instead of worst case scenario. So let's say that Oregon Trust comes back and says, wow, we can get this whole thing fixed and running for $200,000, and we're going to give you $100,000 to fix it. Best case scenario, way off from 500,000. There you go. They're going to give us 50%. I have no idea. This is just a complete educated guess, right? So the 8,000 they gave us for the boiler, plus if they give us 100,000 to fix the HVAC system, then that's what we would. That's the revenue we would collect this fiscal year if all this happened. Does that make sense?
Susanna, where's the total come from, that 547?
This is looking at the total resources and the beginning fund balance.
Okay, all right,
So it's looking at the 7,000 we got from memberships,
yeah,
the levy tax money, and the money from Oregon Trust,
right, okay,
giving us a total of 500,000 to work with for that we would collect.
okay,
Okay, so then I stopped salaries in November and guesstimated it the rest of the way for one person checking the pool for the rest of this fiscal year, assuming the pool is going to stay closed until July 1st of 21. Okay. This whole scenario, the pool opens July 1st of 21.
okay,
Okay. So then I'm doing my guesstimates on what I think this is going to look like, leaving these three about the same, because this is your utilities and operating supplies is my pool chemicals, because the pool's still going to need chemicals. And then my insurance is a once a year payment. That's what it costs for the whole year.
Yeah.
So it's been about 80,000. So then here's the repairs for the HVAC system, the boiler at this point, and some other repairs, finishing the resurfacing, the electrical, all of those repairs are done. The pool, the transfer from the general fund to the pool, we're looking at about 442,000 in expenses. So we're at a negative 142. We use up all of the beginning fund balance. You can see that the year works. We have $24,000 above our fiscal policy when we end this fiscal year, if that scenario actually happened. Okay.
okay.
So questions on that scenario? Okay. So then this scenario, I drove our salaries back to the actuals of what they were in 18-19, because I haven't finished at this point. I won't be coming up with a new plan at this point, changing the positions and all of that. So this was just, okay, close, right? Because I'm going to reduce somehow salaries, right? Change positions, all of that. Not come back with a full manager, but maybe 2 part-time shift leaders that are just overseeing the scheduling, so that I handle all the other side to get the salaries down, right?
Okay.
So for this model, I used 18-19's actuals for salaries. I used no property tax, no levy money whatsoever. We're still going to get some behind money, people turning in. So I left that budget line item the same, because we collect about 5,000 a year for the old levies that people are catching up their property tax and we're collecting, right?
Okay.
Assuming this was 18-19's actuals, no COVID, full pool, this is what we collected in 18-19. This would be a good idea to use that number. And then gaining it 2% going forward, right? Leaving our 3% increase going forward for the levy, okay? Our interest, giving it its 2.5% increase. That's just saying that the normal growth for just the interest on the money. That's the beginning fund balance money, interest that it's collecting from sitting in the account. Okay. This is what we would come up with for what revenue would come in. And as you can see, now the beginning fund balance is gone and we're now running negatives. Then we take the expenses and do the same 3% increase each year. Take the 18-19 actuals again, do the same 3% increase each year. Taking the actual maintenance that needs to get done, which is down at the bottom, which are these expenses we've already showed you in the budget. Here's your pump redoing. Here, the HVAC system got done over here, so that's finished. Here's the roof, right? Here's the doors that need to get replaced, right? Here's all the maintenance. These numbers you can see I brought up to the top.
Ooh,
right here.
I got a
Because we're out of time on the roof just as much as we are on the other things, right? We don't make it. We're actually in a very high negative status, and there's no way the general fund could pull this kind of money to support the pool. And that's kind of where we're at.
Susanna,
questions on that part.
yeah, Susanna, this is Counselor Patty. I do have a question. It might be helpful for the general public to kind of articulate what sort of, not talking about doing this, but hypothetically, what would be taken away from the general fund to subsidize that huge amount? I mean, doesn't seem possible, but what would we even sacrifice to fill that hole, I guess is my question, if we wanted to keep the pool open.
Okay, so I just gave the pool $400,000, which I know the general fund doesn't even have that much money. You would be sacrificing a lot of the police department and a lot of the admin to get there. And so you still didn't get there.
Right.
Where to go? Wait, let me just make sure my math worked. Okay, so there's my 400. So there's,
It made them numbers bigger.
oh, I went the wrong place. Hold on,
Yeah.
wrong spot.
I think I understand your point, but sure.
So I think it's 400,000. Did I do that right? Okay. And then I did a negative, and then I did a zero increase. So here's 400,000 from the general fund all the way across. See that, guys? See that right there?
Mhm.
Now that's the revenue. I put it in the expense side. That's what messed it all up.
Right.
The pool makes it.
Right. And so what kind of resources from our police department would we have to sacrifice at that point to make $400,000 a year transfer over to the pool?
Well, Susanna, this is still saying we get no levy, right? I mean,
Right.
even in the scenario, right? So, I mean, that's going to be the first component of this is, levy dollars that we could, I mean, I think what I want people to know is the anticipation the staff's going to bring forward, and I think council is ready for this to go back in May again and attempt a levy. What that's going to look like, that's going to be probably another good work session to have on how we want to try to move forward and be successful. But so that's the first component of this. I think if the levy doesn't pass, I mean, I'll say the suspense. If we can't get it passed this time, the pool goes from a level of stasis to just, we're going to have to mothball it. I mean, I'm not trying to give away the ending here, but that's really kind of the answer.
Well, it's mothballed now, isn't it?
No, we have it in kind of a, she called it, I mean, I remember the word Susanna used, it's kind of in level of stasis. Right? Yeah, I mean, we're trying to keep it in a place where if we can pass the levy and address some of these issues and save money now, that we can be in a position to try going forward. Cool. I mean, the goal from staff and what we're trying to do here is short-term pain for a long-term gain. Looking at these numbers and you're seeing how much money, we're essentially hemorrhaging keeping it open, to try to minimize all of that, keep the pool at a level of I'll use that word again, stasis, and then try to get that levy passed and then to reopen, addressing some of those maintenance issues and trying to get some of the other issues, expenses down and revenues up a little bit. Susanna, I hope I didn't spoil your mood there, but go ahead.
No, you're fine. So the general fund also supports parks and a library, police department, planning, the courts, council, community center, the street lights that the city still pays for all the businesses' street lights. We're paying that ourselves. Am I missing something in the general fund?
Administration.
And administration, which is, kind of need, you kind of saw the results of having a full impacted admin staff to help, right?
All right. So, Thank you for that, Susanna. I feel like it's critical at this juncture to really sum up for the general public what this means if we were to keep the pool open with no levy passing, that there's a $400,000 hole in that budget every year. I mean, to keep it afloat throughout that forecast, that's what I'm seeing. Right. And I don't think our police department is in any position at this point, or any of those other different services or city functions that you mentioned are in a position to sacrifice $400,000 a month, a year. That seems not feasible to me.
Yeah, you would have to take a big hit to the police department and a bigger hit to the library. Now we've already readjusted the library, and we'll make the cuts starting in January 1st, and we'll start to reduce staffing and hours for the library. And when the library opens, we're looking about a 15-hour-a-week reduction in it being open. And that again makes this balance out and still giving the library some money, which taking from the pool at the moment, and we don't have to give anything from the pool to sustain while we figure out what else we need to do. And then giving the additional money to the parks to continue the services that we are doing.
So Susanna, I don't know if we really planned on going to this wet route, but you kind of opened this door up, and I know Jana's on here as well. What we've done with the library is try to get in a position of again, long-term success, through some short-term pains. And we can actually make it work. So if the levy doesn't pass in the spring, the library can still survive through the 21-22 budget cycle, giving us more time to adjust. So right now, what the goal is to try to minimize some of those costs and be prepared. Now, if the levy passes and we're able to pass it on some level, and this is the future discussion we're going to have, this changes the math on all of these, right? And the library can ramp back up. We can talk about how to make the pool successful going forward. But, at this point, with it failing twice, we just need to have, honest conversations. And the goal was very much to make sure that the library could survive through the rest of this year and go through next year while we look at, trying to find additional funding and resources if that fails. Anything I missed there, Susanna?
No, we and this budget model for the library works for this current fiscal year ending and next fiscal year ending in positive, giving us time with the cuts now. Because honestly, for me as a finance director, I try to figure out ways to do small cuts now. That's why we slowed down spending last year when COVID hit in preparation, and we slowed down spending more now so that we don't just keep on working and then have to do this massive cut that would just be devastating to the essential services. Correct? So that's kind of where we're at. And that's why we're trimming now to prepare for how we can make it work later.
Good.
Susanna?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it would be in this budget. So I know that we have the, I don't know what you'd call it, the fund that was given to us for pool issues that come up. Is that, I'm assuming that's not factored in here because this is kind of like the worst case scenario, or I guess 2021 was best case scenario, but none of that money has been accounted for in any of those repairs either. Is that correct?
In the last fiscal year, we still had some restricted funds from donations a while back, and we moved $66,000 over last fiscal year to do the resurfacing, and some of the repairs. So that was in there. And then we got $30,000 from the foundation. At this point, I have no budget in here for the foundation going forward. And I think we exhausted all of the restricted funds from old donations last year. So that is the only thing I do not have in here, is if the pool foundation would be able to do anything going forward. And I don't know if they've even had time to think about that yet.
So
is the pool I'm sorry, Keith, is the pool foundation, can you explain, because I don't even know, the restricted funds and the pool foundation, is that Friends of the Pool?
No,
or are they different?
It's a different organization, and Hank can speak to this a little bit. I mean, they have money left over from when the work was initially done, and they keep it in a trust, and they helped with the resurfacing last year in funding that. They helped when we redid the locker rooms as well, and I think they could help right now. One of the expenses on there is the $30,000 for the surge pit. I feel like that would be an area we could go to. I think we could get potentially $50,000 from that group. I'm not trying to put them on the spot. I'm not trying to set an expectation. That's just me just being honest. They've been able to help in those kind of increments in the past, and I think they would be able to as well. So I think it's a resource we could use in some of those expenses, but I would look at it as a $50,000 possibility in that range. I don't think they'd want to give necessarily more than that because they're kind of a charitable foundation. They gave to the dog park a few years ago. So, but they hit certain thresholds, and at that point, they look to give money back. So I think that's what you're referring to. And that would be the expectation I would have as potential monies we could have. And I really have looked at that surge pit and maybe a few other minor, $10,000 expense isn't minor, but in the pool, it's a minor expense, some of those other minor expenses.
And we did cost that $66,000.
Okay. And then not so much a question, but just as a comment to throw it out there. So Keith, you just said briefly that we should have another, I would love to have another work session about the levy and whatnot, but also there's been several community members and members that are outside of the community that use the pool that have expressed interest in some sort of fundraising, or even just if we could have the community be a part of the conversation to, I don't know, give us ideas of how they think that we can, keep the pool open, obviously without having to pull money from the general fund. And several ideas have come up. And so I'd love to see other community members be a part of that conversation when we have it.
No, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think we're going to have to talk about what we think are successful strategies and how we can, go forward in the spring to try to be successful this time. So I think that's another work session that would happen early in the 2021 year. The election is in May. I'm sorry, I should have that right off the top of my head what date that would be, but early May. So we, the earlier we can kind of commit to that, and earlier we can have a plan moving forward that gives more times for those community members to be active and engaged, to get the word out and to help get the support we're going to need to get it passed. So,
yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And another piece. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
No. What else did you want to present this evening?
One of the things that we will be doing while it's closed right now is we're going to be monitoring the water level to figure out how much water we're actually losing from the leak, see if we can narrow it down as well, because the surge pit is probably the next big thing with the roof. So we're going to use this time to try to get some numbers as well. Keith, did you have more on maintenance that you wanted to speak to?
I guess I'll just reemphasize for people who haven't watched, there's been three big issues that we've had with the pool: the roof, the HVAC, and from the surge pit to the pool, the piping system is all encased in concrete. So we can't really see what the situation is. We know that every day we've been losing thousands of gallons of water. So we have to produce an additional, and I don't remember the exact number on the top of my head, but a couple thousand gallons every day. So that could indicate a potential leak between the surge pit and the pool. So we're just going to try to get an idea of what that is. Maybe try to do additional, while the pool is down, research and to see if there's something we can do to shore up the pipes that run between the surge pit and the pool itself. Obviously, if there's a catastrophic failure with the delivery of the water from the surge pit, it's a pretty expensive to tear up concrete and redo all of that. So we're going to try to see this time to get a better idea of how much potential leakage we have and maybe what we can do to try to address that. It's been an unknown for a while, and with this time, we're going to try to use it to determine what maybe bigger issue or issues we have and how we can sort of address it going forward. We'd like to avoid, I guess I'll say the quiet part out loud, we'd like to avoid going through all of this, getting a levy passed, and then having another potential big issue. So we're going to try to get on top of that.
Susanna, I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
On your projections in the charge for services section, is that taking into account the new rates that we agreed upon at kind of normal time service levels and activity?
I used 18-19's actuals. And the reason I did that, even though the rates went up, is there is still going to be a level of people not wanting to return because of the emotional impact for the risk of this virus. We know that a lot of businesses, work's not going back to normal, right? Some people may never go to a movie theater again for years, or a restaurant or a public event. They may not feel safe in the pool. I mean, it's because we saw a very low percentage come back, right? So that's why I used 18-19 actual to allot for who's still not going to come back because they're still not going to feel safe even after COVID.
Okay, and then it looks like, we put 400,000 there in the transfer originally, but 300,000 looks like
I
it's
lowered
also
it
still.
back to more like 3 to see what it looked like. And it keeps us just above float, actually.
That looks like the bare minimum right there, pretty
Yeah,
close.
so 3 is the lowest we could go.
And that would be, and basically what that's saying is that number is the combination of any levy we pass and transfer from the general fund is what we need.
Right, this is a general fund supporting without levy money.
Right.
So basically the 200,000 levy money would be coming from the general fund on top of an additional 100,000 to stay on top of these things that need to be done. And of course, we're going to we're going to have to make some serious changes to all aspects of what we do. And maybe the pool wouldn't be even open the 96 hours a week that it used to be open. I mean, it's going to have to take like 4 or 5 different real budget model examples and how we're going to plan this maintenance if the levy doesn't pass, to figure out what we would need from the community to help us get there. You know what I mean? So we'd have to come up with a couple different models. This was just the ones that I used to say the best thing we need to do is freeze this pool, just stop so we can hopefully save it. That's really what this was to do at this point.
And then we don't have an estimate of if the levy as we last presented it passed in the spring, what kind of revenue that would generate?
It'll be, at this point, what I'm hearing from other cities is to take what actual collection rate we get and reduce it by 5% for next year and the following year, and then start the 3% climb up. That's what I'm planning on doing at this point until I hear different. And it's kind of going to be a last minute as we watch the totals come in. And the council meeting in December, I'll give you an update of what property tax and levy money we've collected to date to kind of get a picture a little bit.
Not sell Monday's meeting. Yeah, Ben, I think you kind of have it right. And the 300,000 would be part of the levy. I think what Susanna's kind of referring to, that 5%, we're planning on a 5% reduction in property taxes based off of the impacts of COVID. So we're just kind of looking at that as a across the board sort of cut and expectation. And that's recommendations based off of trainings we've been to and classes we've been to, just talking with anticipation. So, but again, when we talk about levy, we have that levy discussion. I think that would be a great time to really talk about the impacts to all of these and why they're needed and what we can do to support them.
Yeah, because it looks like to me that even if we use the 2021 number from the levy, that's not going to cover it. If we had that same amount of money or even 5% less, like you were saying, that doesn't cover the 300 grand that we'll need every year.
Yeah.
So we need something.
Yeah, we still have another 100,000 from the, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think when we did the budget, let me just look. The 18 actuals was 181, and we barely budgeted above it, anticipating lower collection rates because of COVID. So and we're expecting it to be less. So it's really going to be a bigger than 5% cut if you look at the fact that this is really 18, 19's actuals, basically.
I gotcha. Okay.
Because this is your actuals from 17, 18, 18, 19. And the only thing is I haven't updated 19, 20s. Just finished up the audit, so I'll be able to update and have 19, 20s actuals here shortly. Go ahead, Jordan. Sorry.
That's okay. So you were talking about restructuring how the pool's employees and whatnot. I have a little bit of a concern with how all the programs and whatnot will be running. Like, are you going to be running all the programs, or are the shift supervisors running the programs, or who's going to be like overseeing the overall pool? activities.
It would be those shift supervisors. They would have to be licensed according to Marion County, and they would need to be instructors.
Okay.
And they would, because right now it was done by a mixture of employees, the part-time pool supervisor and the pool manager
Okay.
who's doing the classes. So we'll just restructure it, and they will still be doing that. I would be still focused on what I have been doing is all the financial aspects of it, maintenance and all of those things, and me taking all those pressures off, doing the budgets and working on those things.
Okay.
And I don't know what that actually looks like until I really get in there and start messing around with it. And then all of those pieces, right?
Okay.
There's got to be a way to save some money in there. I have faith I can find something.
So like you can take out the business kind of side of it, and then they can just kind of focus on pool
Program. Exactly.
Pool programs. Okay. I gotcha.
Program manager, maybe is a good word for
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Because I'd have to work with Alyssa and Keith when we restructure and look at that from an HR side and what that would really look like and what pay that would look like. If we can keep it doing 2 part-time people and not having a full-time person. I mean, it's the same reason we have other positions we use part-time to still get the work done. So we just have to play with some budget models. And I'm wide open at this point when we start messing with those for options.
Go ahead, Susanna. I'm going to be excused for just a minute here.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
I have one more question for you, actually.
Okay.
This is kind of related to a lot of the emails and stuff that we've gotten from citizens. There's a lot of mention about physical therapy and stuff that's prescribed to people by their doctors or whatever, and they use the pool for physical therapy. I don't know, and this is part of my ignorance. Do we do any charge for services from the hospital for prescribed activities?
We are completely a recreational pool.
Okay.
We're a complete recreational pool. We're not any type of medical facility whatsoever. And none of our staff is even licensed as physical therapists or any of that kind of stuff.
Right. So it's just people doing it kind of on their own, on probably medical recommendation, but not prescription. Okay.
Yeah.
Susanna, that Councilor McDonald said just kind of made me think of something. So we, when I worked at the Dallas Aquatic Center, they had, not on staff, but they had physical therapists come in and do physical therapy with their patients. Is that, and I don't honestly know how that worked in terms of working with the hospital and whatnot, but is that maybe something that we could try to tap into to like have a partnership with them at all?
I'll speak and say, I think we're open to all ideas at that point. You know, when we go to new hours to maybe set hours where the pool can have people in there just doing that specifically. And if Dallas or somebody or one of the other pools has something they could share and how that partnership works, we're open to ideas and how to bring in revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, because if when it comes down to actually figuring out a budget for after the levy, after we vote in May, then we really know what we got to work with. Then that would be the time to do the brainstorm and start, get a big whiteboard and start just listing it all and see what we can do with it. True, Keith.
I'll unmute. Yeah, let me unmute. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think at this point, everything is on the table for how we can be more efficient, how we can, generate revenue, how we can generate consistent revenue that we know is just kind of, guaranteed. And then to make sure that for those kind of events, we're covering the cost, at the very least, the fixed costs that go into the time that people are in the pool. And I guess I'll add something else. I mean, I've seen people say this, pools don't make money. No, pools do not make money. They're an amenity. But our goal is to try to get as big of return on investment on that dollar as we can, so we can minimize the supplemental costs that we have to do. So there is no expectation the pool will ever break even or make money. That's just not realistic. It's amenity, it's a service we offer a community. It's about trying to get it as close to that as we can.
Whew. Fast. Okay, where are we?
Susanna, are you ready for me? You got more? Or?
No, you go ahead.
That's my completed package, unless you have any other questions on number side. Keith gets the next part.
No. I think it's important that the community try to understand what we're dealing with that pool, and there probably aren't any quick fixes, but we're going to keep looking at ways to fix it as best we can. But there's going to be questions. I get accosted in Safeway with people saying, you should have fixed this. And yeah, okay.
So I'm gonna break some rules of presenting here, and just kind of, I felt like it was important. You know, I hear a lot of times, well, we need to be creative or this or that. And I think it's important to talk about Measure 5 and Measure 50 and some of the limitations, and to also just throw everything on the table about what other funding options we would have. And I'm going to share information from the League of Oregon Cities as well. I'm not going to talk as much about Measure 5. We'll talk more about Measure 50. I'm going to do a caveat before I start here to say also that, as we get this brief synopsis, that Measure 50 is incredibly complicated when you start getting into how taxes are assessed, some of the inequity, some of the challenges. I am not going to get into that for this purpose. I'm just going to talk about what Measure 50 means in terms of us as a local government and our ability to tax and receive taxes and the limitations we have on revenues. So I'm going to hop out. I'm going to share a little story. When I first started here, I had an interesting conversation. I met with what at the time was known as a range rider. They're now known as a senior advisor, and it's a retired ICMA city manager. And I sat down and said, tell me what I need to know as a new Oregon city manager. And the first piece of advice he ever said is, start looking into Measure 5 and Measure 50. You're gonna need to understand them, and it's different than most other communities. And so here's where what you never do in a presentation is put up your notes and then read from your notes. But we're in a Zoom meeting here, and I'm basically gonna do this from the LOC. And I want everyone to have a chance to be able to read in this and kind of see the same things that we're talking about. So the current property tax system is shaped by two constitutional amendments passed in the 1990s, Measure 5 and Measure 50. So prior to Measure 5 and Measure 50, property taxes in Oregon were assessed under a levy-based system with the levy amount applied to each property's real market value. To meet community service demands, each taxing district calculated its own levy according to budgetary needs. Measure 5 and 50, however, combined to create a rate-based tax system while reducing taxable values and limiting tax rate growth. And I'll talk about this more as we go along. The rate became a constitutionally fixed amount, leading to a restriction of local government and school revenues. So in 1997, let's talk about Measure 5 really quickly. Measure 5 sets limits on the amount local jurisdictions can tax. If you overstep those limits, which include county, city, fire district, school district, then there's something known as compression, and where all taxes are sort of reduced. It's an important part of Measure 5 and 50. You hear them combined all the time. For our purposes right now, Measure 5 really doesn't go into place. I just wanted it to be talked about just to say that we're not ignoring it. So let's talk about Measure 50. So our permanent tax rate was set in 1997 at $3.32.8 per assessed value. One of the other important things to keep in this is the confusion sometimes is assessed value versus real market value. Measure 50 changed that. So real market value is not what you're taxed off. You're taxed off of this assessed value, which is quite different. And one of the things you might have seen in some of your notes, people were confused about the average assessed value we had in Stayton because the real market value is much different, and that's a true statement. But the reality is Measure 5 and Measure 50, most notably Measure 50, set limits. So prior to 1997 and in most other states in the union, what we're having a conversation now is, what do you as a governing body have the will to set our tax levy rate at? Mill levy is what I learned. So right now we're at $3.32.8. I could say to you, we want to go to $4 to cover the library, parks, and pool. Oh, by the way, would you be willing to go up to $4.25 to cover infrastructure challenges, roads, water system, whatever it may be, right? And you as a governing body could set that determination of what the political will is and what we want in terms of resources. Unfortunately, with the state of Oregon, our tax levy is set. It was set in 1997, sort of arbitrarily, and we can't change it. So that really leads to the second part, and I kind of talked about some of this already, but Measure 5 gave all existing tax districts a permanent operating rate levy. And it was primarily determined based on whatever tax levies existed when locally when the Measure 50 was passed. So in 1997, that's what our tax rate was set at. These tax rates cannot be changed by any action of the district or its voters and remain as they were set in 1997. So this is it. We can't do anything. However, what we can do is a local option levy, which allows a taxing authority to temporarily exceed the permanent tax rate limit, and they're restricted to 5 years of operation. So that's why we have to go out every 5 years it used to be 4, they've changed it now to 5. When this was first passed, it was every 4 years, now it's every 5 years. But this is the reason why we can't just set the rates at what we're at. So this is where it gets a little complicated and people get confused a little bit. Measure 550 separated property tax from real market value. So as a result, you're no longer taxed on actual market value. Instead, taxation is based on the newly created assessed value, which was established by reducing the real market value of properties in 1995 and 96 by 10%. The permanent rate was then applied to all assessed values. Prior to the Measure 50, properties were typically assessed across the county on a 6-year cycle to produce fair and equitable taxation. However, the 1995-96 snapshot dictated that Measure 50 captured properties wherever they may have been during that assessment cycle, which assessed values on properties at the beginning of the cycle during a snapshot would be set higher than similar properties at the end of the cycle, creating inequities between taxpayers. Since I have been in Oregon for the last 7 years, the number one topic during meetings of city managers is addressing the inequities created by Measure 50. I'm not going to get into a lot of those tonight. We're just kind of hitting on what impacts it has right now for us in terms of funding the services we want. But one of the challenges that you really get into is properties next door to each other, because of this snapshot, because of the different cycles, because of other issues, can be wildly disparate between different properties. So you could pay twice as much as your neighbor does in property tax. The key thing I really want to pull away from here is it's not market value, it's assessed value. And that really is one of the key differences. Another thing, Measure 50 set an annual growth rate of a taxable property value to 3% of assessed value, well below the average rate of inflation. By setting assessed values based on the 95-96 market levels and capping the annual rate of growth, Measure 50 permanently locked into place assessed value imbalances, allowing similarly valued properties to pay dramatically different property tax amounts. So something else is in most other states, and even prior to Measure 50 coming into place, if your property values went up more than 3%, then you would follow with whatever the property tax values were doing. In Oregon, we're limited every year to a 3% growth rate. So if property values go up 5% or 6%, we're capped at 3%. So here's kind of the summary that the League of Oregon Cities have about the enormous negative impacts on the ability of cities and other local governments to meet basic service needs of their citizens. The constitutional changes significantly reduce city revenues by detaching property taxes from market value, imposing permanent district tax rates, capping property tax growth, and setting arbitrary limits on local taxation. And so, as you can see here, this just creates a financial hole that continues to rise as populations grow and community demands for services increase. So the League has made this their top priority every year during the legislative session to try to address this. The longer that Measure 5 and Measure 50 stay in place, you're starting to see these huge inequities. There's information and data out there. If we really want to get into the weeds on some of this, I don't think it really touches on what we're talking about tonight per se. But it's just really an issue that's created a real challenge in Oregon. As of yet, the legislature hasn't looked to address this or fix this, but it's becoming a point where at some point they're going to have to do something on Measure 5 and Measure 50. So I wanted to talk about that because I think sometimes people don't understand potentially what we can do in terms of taxes or why we can't be more creative. And I wanted to go into kind of Measure 50 specifically so that you could see just some of the language, and all of that's taken directly from the League of Oregon Cities website. So this is kind of I did the brief synopsis. I lost everybody. Can everybody see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
I can see you.
I can't see anybody else. So I guess speak up. Oh, and I shared my screen here. Everybody went away.
You're not sharing your screen anymore because it went back to tile view. Do you have tile view or gallery view? What is it called?
Let me take a peek here. Let me fix it.
Yeah, gallery view.
There we go. Let's go back to this. Share. There we go. All right, now I'm better. So again, just kind of Measure 5 sets taxing limits and compression, not really germane, just wanted to talk about it since we're talking about here. Permanent tax rate set at the 1997 assessed value of $1,000 per taxable value at the $3.32.8. And then Measure 50 divorce property tax for real market value and the limiting of the growth to 3%. So the next question is, so what options do we have? Oh yeah, go ahead.
So just to kind of sum this up, this is the money that we get in the general fund, right?
Yes.
So this is all the money that we can use for all the services that Susanna talked about.
Right.
Our administration, our police, our courts, the street lights improvements and things like that. So correct. Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, before Measure 50, what we'd be having a conversation right now is, we'd set the levy, if you will, at $4, and would we be willing to go up to cover other things, right? We could do that internally, but now because of this, we can't. The 332 is what we have, and our police budget essentially is taken almost in entirety through the property taxes. So that our property taxes basically cover the police budget. I'm off a little bit, but not by much. It's a pretty good rule of thumb just to think of it that way. So all the other services we do, we're sort of limited in why we need this levy. So here's the brainstorming of, here are all the funding options that we actually have in place. I'm sorry for the big list. I have a secondary list here, but this is really kind of the limitations of what we can and can't do in terms of other options for funding beyond property taxes. General obligation bonds backed by a special property levy can be created for a single project like a new building, if we wanted to do something like that, or can be issued for a series of similar smaller projects. Parks, road maintenance are pretty common with these. Again, it's got to be approved by the voters. A local transient lodging tax. We don't have a hotel or a motel. And even if we did, only a small portion of that can be used for general services. Food and beverage tax or other similar sales tax, construction excise tax, business income tax, similar to the tax established in Portland. You'll see Portland is used several times in here. Established fees for various city services such as stormwater fee, public safety fee, transportation fee, park system fee, which would be what we'd probably be looking at here. We can impose a business license fee. We currently don't have business licenses, and we can fully implement applicable system development charges. So we can be aggressive in our SDC charges. I want to say I'm not advocating any of these. I'm just saying I'm putting everything out on the kitchen table, if you will, to say, here are the other funding options we would have if we were looking for some other way to fund local services beyond property tax. So before I move on these, was there any questions, comments, or feedback you want to provide on this list? And I do want to give time for everybody to look them over. But this was everything. I worked with Ross and talked to some colleagues, and this was everything we could come up with the exception of what I'm going to share next, which wouldn't be a short-term solution, but could be a longer-term solution.
Keith, kind of back to the beginnings of your comments, what would happen if we tried to change that tax rate from $3.32.5, whatever, up to $4? That scenario of just bumping that rate up. What chance do we have of getting that passed?
I'm not an attorney, but we'd be in violation of the Constitution. But it's a constitutional limit that's set on us. So, I think all it would take would be someone to complain or the state to notify us that we couldn't charge that rate. And, I really hadn't considered violating that. But like I said, it's a constitutional amendment. So I think it would be unwise to go beyond that. I'll just say 333 to round up. But
Was that a statewide rate?
So yeah, and the information, if you haven't seen, it's quite interesting. Every city's rate was set in that 1997 rate. And so some cities, especially smaller rural cities, were put in a really difficult position potentially. If you had a larger bond issue that was out at the time, or if you were doing major infrastructure improvements in 1995, 96, your rates might be set higher just by pure luck. There was no anticipation from city managers who were around at the time. Everybody was sort of caught off guard of whatever you had set it at in the 95, 96 year became your 97 rate going forward in perpetuity. So,
wow, okay.
I can say definitively, that since I've been here, we've taxed at that maximum amount. And I think probably since 97, that's been what the city's been able to charge.
Okay.
So again, I'm just throwing everything out on the kitchen table. I mean, there's a longer term options out here that we could explore, but the problem with several of these is the time that it would take to potentially put them into place, or even the time it would take for revenues to come in to be able to support that. An urban renewal district is something that would be challenging because generally that's gone off property taxes and improvement over property taxes. So I'm not sure how that would work in this scenario. I'm not saying it's not possible, but basically what you do is you set the tax rate at the urban renewal establishment, and then as things grow, you can take the additional revenue and put it towards cost. The other thing is to create a special taxing district. So you could create a pool district or a library district. The time frame of that would be 12 to 18 months based on a best case scenario. Could be more like 2 years to get something like that in place. You'd be looking at something that would extend outside the boundaries of Stayton and incorporate other communities. The city would essentially be like the fire department. The city would no longer have control. That would become its own taxing entity with its own authority over those entities. I think the challenge, I'll just say, just to be blunt, is if you can't pass it locally, expanding beyond. And I know there's people that are invested outside of the city limits of Stayton, but you'd have to get the communities that you expand into to buy in and be on board with entering that special taxing district to do that. So those are your long-term options. Again, these wouldn't be quick solutions or quick fixes. The urban renewal district would probably have to rely on some other growth happening to make that viable. I'm not advocating for any of these. I'm just throwing out what options there are because I just wanted to be transparent and open about here's everything that we've discovered we could do to try to raise additional resources. Questions on this?
No.
So that's kind of the additional summary. What we wanted to do is we wanted Susanna to go over the financials. We wanted to go over, what other options do we have. We've talked about going back for another levy in the spring. I think that's still the right option. How we do that and how we be successful, I think is a good future work session to have. But we just wanted to present, here's why we have the challenges we have in terms of revenues. Here's the other options we have. And again, be happy to answer any questions on this.
Questions or thoughts? Ooh, a lot of stuff.
Keith, Susanna, this is Councilor Mullen. I just want to thank you guys for all the information. I think we're on track. I think the levy and trying to get it back on the ballot is the right move at this point. Having another executive session prior to talk about that would be great. There are other ideas, but with regards to longer term solutions that I think I'm going to chair for myself until we get to a different conversation, seeing what happens in the May election. So I just wanted to thank you for the information tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to echo what Chris said. You guys did a great job, and that was much more about Measure 50 and Measure 5 than I did know. So thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I've got one question maybe for Keith.
Yeah.
I've seen and read a lot of talk about another potential stimulus bill at the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
In those, they sometimes talk about money for state and local governments.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any sort of feeling or information about what that could look like, and if that kind of thing does pass? Does that usually just mean general fund money, or does that come with earmarks for specific uses typically?
What we're anticipating, if something like that were to happen, would be more infrastructure projects and more shovel-ready infrastructure projects. So, we're taking a little bit of a gamble and a risk, and I say a little bit on that roundabout design, with the idea of, if money were to become available, that we would have that shovel-ready project ready to go. And that would be what we'd see as more, generally with the federal government, what they want to see is tangible infrastructure improvements. We can couch that too with opening up property around that area for traded sector businesses, for housing and things like that, in case there is criteria that need to be met, or trying to be competitive against other entities that are trying to do that. So that's where we would really hopefully see money be available for that intersection. Now, there could be others, and if the requirements are different than they were during the last stimulus package in what, 2009 and 10, we can see. So we'll keep our eyes open. What we're anticipating right now is basically infrastructure shovel-ready projects.
Okay, thanks.
One last thought I would have on this is that as we were sitting here in a sense kind of grasping at the straws of and thinking about, and there'll be people in the community saying, well, there was an option to throw $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 out of the general fund at this pool. Why don't you just go ahead and do that? That's going to take a bite out of other programs and other functions, and we would, I think, do well to move the conversation in another direction if we hear that sort of stuff. That's just a thought from this end. And thank you guys again for a good job and lots of numbers. And I need to go back and review my CPA class notes and try to realize why I didn't get a very good grade in that. Thank you, Susanna.
You're welcome. I try to break it down as to small bites so it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, it still is. So,
and we do have to protect the core services. That's probably what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, is that when we put our budgets together, core services is we have to protect. The pool is an amenity, a special service, right?
Well, we certainly should, rather than go out, take off on a tangent to protect something else. Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
I just
go. Go ahead. You're not too late.
I just wanted to thank you for the presentation, and then just reiterate that After the new year, I'd love to see us have like a community, work session so that we can get more voices involved and come up with some ideas on how we can. And I've heard several people say that, they're invested in the pool, and so they are ready to make some investments towards the pool. And so what that looks like, I'm not really sure, but I'd love to see community members step up and try to help us out with this. Even if it's not monetarily, but also just getting the word out about the levy and how important it is to, not just the pool, but, the library is, again, I've said this on several different meetings, but our pool, our parks, and our library are one of the reasons that my family moved to town. So, and a lot of people come here from other places to access those, those services. And then when they're here, they sometimes buy gas, they'll go grocery shopping, they do lots of other things here. So they're reasons that people come to Stayton, and I like to keep them here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Good. Anyone else? Okay, well, let's call this work session for the evening, and I guess we'll see everyone next Monday on a regular council meeting. So thank you all, and good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.